History whispers. It speaks to us through the rustling of old documents, the crumbling facades of ancient buildings, and the echoes of decisions made generations ago. Our world, in all its complexity and wonder, is a tapestry woven from the threads of the past. To truly understand the present, we must embark on a journey through time, revisiting the days that shook the world. Each decade, like a movement in a grand symphony, carries its own unique melody and rhythm. The 1920s roar with the exuberance of jazz and the Charleston. The 1930s echo with the somber strains of economic depression and the rise of fascism. The 1940s resonate with the clash of global conflict and the subsequent hope for lasting peace. This chronological journey through the most pivotal decades of the 20th century will not merely recount historical events. Instead, we will delve into the heart of these eras, unearthing the stories of those who lived through them. Imagine the sights and sounds of bustling cities on the cusp of change. Picture the faces of individuals, both famous and unknown, who dared to challenge conventions and shape the future. Our exploration will be more than a dry recitation of dates and names. It will be a vibrant tapestry woven from personal stories, cultural shifts, political upheavals, and technological advancements. By understanding the forces that shaped the 20th century, we gain a deeper appreciation for the challenges and opportunities that define our own time. The decades we will traverse were not merely periods of time. They were crucibles of change, forging new identities, ideologies, and realities. The 1920s, a time of unprecedented prosperity and cultural dynamism, laid the groundwork for the economic turmoil of the 1930s. The global conflict of the 1940s, in turn, gave rise to the geopolitical complexities of the Cold War, which cast a long shadow over the latter half of the century. Through it all, the indomitable spirit of humanity endured. From the ashes of war and economic despair, new movements for equality and justice emerged. The civil rights movement, the fight for gender equality, and the environmental movement all took root in the latter half of the 20th century, shaping the social and political landscape we inhabit today. The Roaring Twenties, a decade pulsating with a frenetic energy. The Great War, a dark cloud lifted, unleashed a wave of relief and optimism. Across America and Europe, cities throbbed with a newfound vibrancy. Jazz music, born in the heart of New Orleans, became the soundtrack of the age. Its syncopated rhythms and improvisational spirit captured the era's sense of liberation and abandon. From the speakeasies of Chicago to the cabarets of Paris, a new generation danced the Charleston and the Black Bottom. Flappers, with their bobbed hair and shorter hemlines, challenged traditional notions of femininity. It was a time of social and cultural revolution as women gained the right to vote and greater autonomy over their lives. The automobile, once a luxury, became increasingly common, transforming transportation and expanding horizons. The economic boom of the 1920s fueled this era of exuberance. New industries, powered by technological advancements, emerged. The radio brought news and entertainment into homes across the nation. The telephone connected people across vast distances. Mass production techniques made consumer goods more affordable, leading to a surge in consumption and economic growth. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed as if prosperity would last forever. Yet beneath the surface of this gilded age, cracks began to appear. The agricultural sector struggled, burdened by overproduction and falling prices. Income inequality widened, with a small percentage of the population amassing vast wealth while many others struggled to make ends meet. The stock market, fueled by speculation and easy credit, soared to unsustainable heights. The year 1929, Black Tuesday, a date etched in history as the day the music stopped. The stock market, long teetering on the brink, crashed with a resounding thud. Millions of shares were traded in a panic, their value plummeting by the hour. The dreams of instant riches evaporated, leaving behind a trail of shattered fortunes and broken lives. The Great Depression, the most severe economic downturn in modern history, had begun. The collapse of the stock market triggered a domino effect throughout the global economy. Banks failed, businesses shuttered, and unemployment soared to unprecedented levels. Bread lines stretched for blocks, a stark testament to the widespread suffering. The Dust Bowl, an ecological disaster that ravaged the American Midwest, added to the misery, driving countless families from their homes in search of work and sustenance. In the face of such adversity, governments and individuals alike grappled with how to respond. Some clung to the hope that the crisis would pass quickly, a temporary setback on the road to prosperity. Others, however, recognized the need for fundamental change. New political ideologies promising radical solutions gained traction. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited the economic turmoil and social unrest, preaching a message of hate and national revival. The world watched with a mixture of apprehension and uncertainty as the decade drew to a close. The Roaring Twenties, a time of unprecedented prosperity and cultural transformation, had given way to an era of economic hardship and political upheaval. The stage was set for a new act, one that would test the resilience of nations and the very foundations of the international order. Depression's grip, a world in crisis. The 1930s dawned not with the hopeful sunrise of a new decade, but with the lingering darkness of the Great Depression. The economic shockwaves originating from the Wall Street crash of 1929 reverberated across the globe. Industrial production plummeted, global trade ground to a halt. Unemployment reached staggering levels, leaving millions in desperate poverty. Images of breadlines and shantytowns, grim testaments to the human cost of economic collapse, became all too common. In the United States, the Dust Bowl, a man-made ecological disaster, compounded the misery. Millions of farmers, their livelihoods destroyed by drought and dust storms, migrated west in search of work and opportunity, only to find more hardship and despair. The social fabric, already strained by the rapid changes of the 1920s, began to fray. Traditional values and institutions were questioned as people struggled to make sense of their circumstances. Trust in governments eroded, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies promising simplistic solutions to complex problems. The world was adrift, searching for answers in a time of unprecedented economic and social upheaval. The old certainties had vanished, and the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty and fear. It was a time that tested the limits of human endurance and the very foundations of the global order. New Deal dawn, seeds of hope amidst despair. In 1933, as the United States grappled with the depths of the Great Depression, a new president offered a glimmer of hope. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in his inaugural address, declared, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." His words, imbued with a sense of purpose and resolve, resonated with a nation yearning for leadership. Roosevelt's New Deal, a series of programs and reforms aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform, marked a turning point in American history. The government, once seen as a distant entity, took an active role in addressing the needs of its citizens. Public works projects, such as the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Civilian Conservation Corps, put millions back to work, building infrastructure and conserving natural resources. Social Security, a landmark program established in 1935, provided a safety net for the elderly, the unemployed, and the disabled. It was a radical departure from the prevailing ethos of individual responsibility, recognizing the government's obligation to care for its most vulnerable citizens. The New Deal did not end the Great Depression. However, it did alleviate suffering, restore a measure of confidence, and lay the foundation for a more just and equitable society. It was a testament to the power of collective action and the enduring belief in the possibility of progress even in the darkest of times. Gathering storm, the shadow of war looms. While the United States grappled with the Great Depression, a storm was brewing in Europe. The Treaty of Versailles, signed at the end of World War I, had left Germany humiliated and economically crippled, creating fertile ground for resentment and extremism. The Nazi Party, led by the charismatic but deeply disturbed Adolf Hitler, exploited this discontent, promising national rejuvenation and revenge. Hitler's ascent to power in 1933 marked a turning point in world history. His ideology, rooted in racial hatred and national superiority, posed a grave threat to the fragile peace that had emerged from the ashes of World War I. He embarked on a campaign of rearmament, violating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and began expanding German territory, annexing Austria and the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The world watched with growing apprehension as Hitler's aggression escalated. The League of Nations, formed in the aftermath of World War I to prevent future conflicts, proved powerless to stop him. Appeasement, a policy pursued by Britain and France in a desperate attempt to avoid another devastating war, only emboldened Hitler further. By the end of the 1930s, the world stood on the brink of another global conflict. The lessons of the past seemed to have been forgotten. The forces of nationalism, militarism, and totalitarian aggression were on the march, casting a long shadow over the future. Global Inferno, the world at war. September 1st, 1939. The world watched in horror as Hitler unleashed his war machine upon Poland. This act of aggression shattered the fragile peace that had held since the end of the Great War. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, had begun. Across Europe, the horrors of war unfolded. The German Blitzkrieg, a lightning war of tanks and air power, swept through Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Cities were reduced to rubble. Millions of civilians were caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by the relentless march of armies. The Battle of Britain, a relentless air campaign waged in the skies over England, tested the resolve of the British people. The Blitz, the nightly bombing of London and other cities, brought terror and destruction, but also steeled the determination of the British to resist Nazi tyranny. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, his voice a beacon of defiance, rallied his nation with stirring speeches declaring, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." The United States, initially hesitant to become embroiled in another European conflict, provided material aid to Great Britain but remained officially neutral. However, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 shattered American isolationism and plunged the nation headlong into the global conflict. Ruins and rebirth picking up the pieces, 1945. The world, weary from years of war, celebrated the defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. The cost of victory, however, was staggering. Millions lay dead, victims of the insatiable hunger of total war. Cities across Europe and Asia were reduced to rubble. The global economy was in shambles. The task of rebuilding from the ashes of war was daunting. The Marshall Plan, a massive aid program funded by the United States, provided crucial assistance to war-torn European nations, helping to rebuild infrastructure, jumpstart economies, and prevent the spread of communism. From the ruins of war emerged a new world order. The United Nations, founded in 1945, offered hope for a more peaceful and cooperative future. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948, affirmed the inherent dignity and equality of all human beings, a powerful rebuke to the horrors of the Holocaust and other wartime atrocities. The post-war years witnessed a surge in social and political change. The horrors of war had shaken old certainties, and a new generation, shaped by the shared experience of conflict and sacrifice, demanded a better world. The civil rights movement in the United States gained momentum, challenging racial segregation and discrimination. In Europe, the foundations were laid for what would become the European Union, a bold experiment in international cooperation. Dawn of the Cold War, a new global chessboard. As the world emerged from the shadow of World War II, a new conflict, one that would come to define the latter half of the 20th century, was taking shape: the Cold War. The wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union, forged in the crucible of conflict, had begun to unravel, replaced by suspicion, mistrust, and ideological rivalry. The Soviet Union, led by the enigmatic Joseph Stalin, sought to expand its influence in Eastern Europe, installing communist regimes in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and elsewhere. The United States, fearing the spread of communism, adopted a policy of containment, seeking to limit Soviet expansionism through a combination of military, economic, and diplomatic pressure. The Cold War was a global conflict fought not on traditional battlefields but through proxy wars, espionage, propaganda, and a relentless arms race. The threat of nuclear annihilation hung over the world, casting a long shadow over the lives of millions. The Berlin airlift, the Korean War, and the Cuban Missile Crisis were just a few of the flashpoints that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The Cold War also fueled a technological arms race as the United States and the Soviet Union poured vast resources into developing ever more powerful weapons and space exploration programs. The 1950s, a decade often remembered for its vibrant colors and seemingly carefree spirit, a stark contrast to the somber hues of the war-torn 1940s. The world, weary from conflict, sought solace in normalcy, stability, and the promise of a brighter future. America, emerging from World War II as a global superpower, embraced a newfound prosperity. The suburbs, with their manicured lawns and picket fences, became symbols of this aspirational lifestyle. Families gathered around newly acquired television sets, sharing laughter and entertainment. Elvis Presley's music, with its infectious energy and rebellious spirit, captivated a generation eager to break free from the constraints of the past. However, the Cold War cast a long shadow over this seemingly idyllic decade. The threat of nuclear annihilation loomed large, a constant reminder of the fragility of peace. The arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union intensified, with both sides amassing vast arsenals of nuclear weapons. Duck and cover drills became commonplace in schools, a stark reminder of the ever-present danger. Despite the underlying tensions of the Cold War, the 1950s witnessed significant progress in various fields. The polio vaccine, developed by Jonas Salk, offered hope for eradicating a disease that had claimed the lives of countless children. The civil rights movement, though still in its early stages, began to challenge the deeply entrenched system of racial segregation in the United States. Beneath the surface of conformity and prosperity, cracks began to appear in the seemingly stable facade of 1950s society. The civil rights movement, fueled by the landmark Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court ruling in 1954, gained momentum. Rosa Parks' courageous act of defiance on a Montgomery, Alabama bus in 1955 sparked a year-long boycott, galvanizing the nation's attention and highlighting the injustices faced by African Americans. The struggle for racial equality was not confined to the United States. In South Africa, the apartheid regime tightened its grip on power, enforcing a brutal system of racial segregation and discrimination. Nelson Mandela, a young lawyer and activist, emerged as a leading voice in the growing resistance movement, advocating for equality and justice in the face of oppression. The Cold War, too, entered a new phase. The Soviet Union's successful launch of Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite in 1957, shocked the United States and ignited the space race. The race to space became a symbol of technological prowess and national prestige, pushing both superpowers to invest heavily in scientific research and development. The 1950s also witnessed the rise of youth culture. Rock and roll music, with its rebellious spirit and energetic rhythms, became the anthem of a generation eager to break free from the constraints of tradition. James Dean, with his brooding good looks and rebellious persona, became a cultural icon, embodying the anxieties and aspirations of a generation on the cusp of change. The successful launch of Sputnik 1 in 1957 sent shockwaves through the United States. The Soviet Union, once perceived as technologically inferior, had beaten America to space, challenging its image of superiority and fueling anxieties about the capabilities of its communist rival. The space race, a Cold War competition for technological supremacy, became a defining feature of the late 1950s and beyond. Both the United States and the Soviet Union poured vast resources into their respective space programs, developing ever more powerful rockets, satellites, and ultimately, manned spacecraft. The world watched in awe and apprehension as the space race unfolded. Each successful launch, whether by the United States or the Soviet Union, was a symbolic victory in the Cold War, a testament to the ingenuity and determination of humankind, but also a reminder of the potential for destruction that shadowed this era. The development and testing of nuclear weapons added another layer of complexity to the Cold War rivalry. The atomic age, ushered in by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, brought with it a profound sense of both wonder and fear. The power to harness the atom held the promise of limitless energy, but also the potential for unimaginable destruction. The 1960s were a decade of profound transformation and turbulence in the United States and around the world. The civil rights movement, which had been gaining momentum in the 1950s, erupted with renewed vigor. African Americans, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., fought tirelessly against the deeply entrenched racial segregation and discrimination that marred American society. The movement's tactics evolved from peaceful protests to include more assertive actions, leading to pivotal events such as the Freedom Rides and the Birmingham Campaign. The decade also witnessed the emergence of other social movements, as various groups sought to challenge the status quo and demand equality. The counterculture movement, with its roots in the liberal campuses of the United States, rejected traditional values and norms, advocating for a society based on peace and love. This movement, symbolized by events like the Woodstock Music Festival, became synonymous with the 1960s ethos of rebellion and change. Globally, nations in Africa and Asia threw off the yoke of colonial rule, inspired in part by the civil rights struggle in America. The winds of change, as British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan famously referred to them, blew across continents, reshaping nations and forging new identities. The era was marked by a sense of possibility and the belief that society could be remade in a fairer and more just image. Parallel to the civil rights and counterculture movements, the 1960s also saw the rise of the women's liberation movement. This movement was significantly influenced by Betty Friedan's 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, which challenged the traditional roles assigned to women in society and sparked widespread debate about women's rights. Women across the United States and much of the Western world began to question the systems that limited their careers, education, and personal growth. This questioning quickly turned into organized action. Groups like the National Organization for Women, NOW, founded in 1966, advocated for equal rights, including the enforcement of laws against workplace discrimination and the legalization of abortion. The movement also tackled issues of personal freedom and sexual liberation, contributing to a broader societal shift towards more open discussions about sexuality and gender roles. By the end of the decade, the women's liberation movement had achieved significant legislative victories, including the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination based on gender as well as race. These achievements, however, were just the beginning of a long struggle that would continue into the following decades, as women kept fighting for complete equality in all spheres of life. Section 3. Moonshots and Missiles. The Space Race Intensifies. The space race, initiated in the late 1950s, reached new heights during the 1960s. The competition between the United States and the Soviet Union not only symbolized the technological prowess and military might of the two superpowers, but also embodied humanity's unquenchable thirst for exploration. The decade was marked by a series of dramatic milestones, starting with Yuri Gagarin's historic orbit around the Earth in 1961, which made him the first human to travel to space. The United States, spurred by President John F. Kennedy's ambitious promise to land a man on the moon before the decade's end, poured enormous resources into NASA. This culminated in the Apollo 11 mission, which successfully landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969. The iconic phrase, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," captured the imagination of millions and marked a significant victory in the space race. The space race had deeper implications beyond the technological and exploratory achievements. It was a crucial element of the Cold War, demonstrating the capabilities of each superpower not only to each other, but to the entire world. Moreover, the advancements in technology and knowledge gained from space exploration laid the groundwork for future scientific and technological developments. Each of these sections reflects a transformational aspect of the 1960s, highlighting how the decade was not only one of significant social change, but also of remarkable achievements in human rights and science. Section 1. Legacies of Change, the enduring impact of transformative decades. As our journey through the pivotal decades of the 20th century concludes, we stand at a precipice, looking back at a century marked by profound transformation and looking ahead to an uncertain future. The echoes of the roaring 20s, the somber strains of the Great Depression, the thunderous clash of World War II, the chilling silence of the Cold War, and the reverberations of social revolutions continue to shape our world today. The 20th century, in all its complexity and contradiction, serves as a stark reminder of the cyclical nature of history. The unbridled optimism of the 1920s gave way to the despair of the Great Depression, only to be followed by the global conflict of World War II. From the ashes of war emerged a new world order, one marked by both the promise of cooperation and the threat of nuclear annihilation. The Cold War, a global chess match played out over decades, cast a long shadow, shaping political alliances, fueling technological innovation, and influencing cultural trends. The social revolutions of the 1960s, a testament to the human spirit's unyielding pursuit of equality and justice, continue to resonate today. The civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement, and the counterculture movement challenged deeply ingrained social norms, sparked dialogues on identity and equality, and paved the way for a more inclusive society. These movements remind us that progress is often hard-won, requiring unwavering commitment, courage, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Section 2. The Unfinished Symphony Echoes of the Past in a Digital Age. The dawn of the 21st century ushered in an era defined by rapid technological advancements, globalization, and an increasingly interconnected world. The digital revolution, fueled by the internet and mobile technology, transformed the way we communicate, consume information, and interact with the world around us. However, even as we navigate this new digital landscape, we find ourselves grappling with echoes of the past. Economic inequality, a persistent challenge throughout the 20th century, remains a pressing issue in the 21st century. The gap between the haves and have-nots continues to widen in many parts of the world, fueling social unrest, political instability, and a sense of disenfranchisement. The global financial crisis of 2008, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy, highlighted the vulnerabilities of our financial systems and the need for greater regulation and oversight. The rise of nationalism, populism, and authoritarianism in various parts of the world harks back to the dark days of the 1930s, when economic hardship and social upheaval created fertile ground for extremist ideologies. The lessons learned from the horrors of World War II, particularly the importance of international cooperation, tolerance, and respect for human rights, seem to have faded in the minds of some. Yet amidst these challenges, there are also glimmers of hope. The global interconnectedness fostered by technology has facilitated the rise of transnational movements advocating for social justice, environmental protection, and human rights. Young people in particular have played a pivotal role in these movements, harnessing the power of social media to raise awareness, mobilize support, and demand change. Section 3. Towards an Uncertain Future, Navigating the Challenges of the 21st Century. As we stand at this juncture in history, the path forward is fraught with both challenges and opportunities. Climate change, a defining issue of our time, poses an existential threat to our planet, demanding collective action and a fundamental shift in our relationship with the environment. The COVID-19 pandemic, a global crisis that exposed the fragility of our interconnected world, served as a stark reminder of the importance of public health, scientific research, and international cooperation. The rise of artificial intelligence, while holding immense potential for progress in various fields, also raises ethical concerns about job displacement, algorithmic bias, and the potential misuse of this powerful technology. Navigating these complex challenges will require thoughtful leadership, informed decision-making, and a willingness to embrace innovation while upholding ethical considerations. The lessons learned from the 20th century, a century marked by both remarkable progress and unspeakable tragedy, can serve as a guide as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century. The importance of embracing diversity, fostering inclusivity, upholding human rights, and promoting dialogue over division remains as relevant today as it was a century ago. The symphony of history continues to unfold, its melody a tapestry woven from the threads of the past, the rhythms of the present, and the harmonies of the future. As we move forward, let us remember the words of William Faulkner. The past is never dead, it's not even past. By understanding our history, we gain a deeper appreciation for the present and empower ourselves to shape a more just, equitable, and sustainable future for generations to come.